Welcome to Black Writer Therapy, a podcast where Black women writers are invited to sit on the proverbial couch, have a cup of tea, and share the stories behind the stories, and what it really takes to write books about Black women in an industry that still prefers white as the default. I'm your host, published author and unlicensed therapist, Shawn. Black Writer Therapy is now in session.
Jacki Kelly has been writing since her fourth grade teacher made her keep a journal for a grade. Now she does it to keep track of all the fascinating and heartbreaking moments that life throws her way. Poetry, personal essays, short stories, and novels have all occupied space in her heart and on her hard drive. She has published over 15 books in women's fiction and romance and is the current president of Women's Fiction Writer Association.
Welcome, Ms. Jacki Kelly, to Black Writer Therapy Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to sit on our proverbial couch. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Now, there's just, first and foremost, I've been kind of like perusing through WFWA, because I joined probably sometime last year,
Okay.
in the latter part of last year.
Oh,
And
okay.
and when I was picking people that I wanted to have on the show, I'd read the second book in the
Baptiste, yes.
In the Baptiste, yes. Okay, so I'd read the second book and I was like, oh, she sounds interesting. I would love to have her on the show. And that's when I was just kind of thinking about doing the podcast. I wasn't sure if I was going to, because I've done podcasts, but I've never done podcasts with like a guest. And
Okay.
so I was oh God, I'm not going to get this woman on my show. And so I'm in a writing date and I'm like, God, I just read this really great book by Jacki Kelly and I want to ask her about something, but I don't know if I'm going to be able. And of course they're like, you know who Jacki is? I said, yeah, the writer of the book. The book that I just read. And so no, Michelle Montgomery says, no, she's the president of WFWA. I was like, what? Are you serious?
Since January 2022. Yeah, since January of last year. Yes.
Wow. I want to get into that. How is that, like being the president of, because this is a really big writing organization.
Well, it is. I mean, it's not as big as some, of course, but it is big and it is growing quite fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think now we're over 2,000 members. And, this year we celebrate our 10th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been in existence for 10 years. And it's been around for a while, this organization. And it is a great organization to work with. I was at another writers conference in New York, and I was just talking to another writer there, and I can't remember her name because so long ago. And she was saying, there's a group organization that writes women fiction. And I was like, I didn't know that. And so she told me all about it. And she said to me, they have a conference every year in Albuquerque, she said. And she said, and it sells out really fast. So if you ever want to go, you got to really jump on it. So, I came home and I did my homework. I was investigating it. And I did find the organization. And that very year, I think I did, it had to be the next year because the conference was like in the summer or whatever. But the next year, I think in February, as soon as their registration opened up for their retreat in Albuquerque, I jumped right on it and I was lucky enough to go. And and I've been to every retreat they've had since then. And
Wow.
and it was something about that first meeting when I was there and just listening to the ladies talk. And I shouldn't say ladies because it's an organization for men and women, but just listening to them talk and the camaraderie and the friendships that they had. And I was like, oh, I like this group. And at that first meeting, I raised my hand. I said, I want to volunteer. I want to volunteer. And I remember Lainey Cameron, she asked me to become the volunteer coordinator. So I think almost immediately I became a volunteer coordinator for WFWA, and I've been volunteering for the organization ever since.
Yeah, it's kind of that it's a place where you want to give your time and whatever like skills or services you have, you want to do that. And because they do give so much, like I've been attending writing dates, I'm
Yeah.
actually presenting at the conference this
I,
year.
I saw your name
Um,
on the list.
I was
Yeah.
like, how did that happen? It was weird how it came about. But I mean, this organization has been more, I think, of a support and an educational tool for
Yes.
me. I get
But
so much more out of WFWA and it's completely virtual. And, we have things like in person here, but I'm like, I feel closer to the writers that I've met in WFWA because it's just more genuine and it's just
yeah.
more, they're giving.
Yeah, and WFWA, by I mean, and it is that we have members who are all over the place, so not just in the
Hmm.
United States, and it's always been a virtual organization. And
Hmm.
so that's, I mean, during the pandemic where lots of, people were shutting down and not being able to do things, we were able to actually do more because we didn't
Hmm.
have to pivot. We were already doing on virtual workshops and virtual
Hmm.
webinars, the writing dates. So, and since the pandemic, we've had a lot more people joining. I guess people were looking for, since they couldn't do things in person, they were looking for places where they could do. And I think that's what helped our membership to explode a little bit, was the
Yeah.
ability to be able to do so much virtually. Yeah.
Yes, I 100% agree because it's an amazing organization. I tell everybody, every writer I come across, I'm like, oh my gosh, you really do need to check out WFWA. It's something there for you, I promise. Even if you think you
Uh,
don't write it, just check it out because it's such a great place. So thank you so much for presiding as the president
well, thank
and
you.
doing such a great job. I wasn't supposed to talk about that just yet, but
Oh, okay.
sometimes
Okay.
I fangirl, Miss Kelly. Sometimes I fangirl. Um, so okay, here's the question I have to ask every guest when you guys come on, because the show is Black Writer Therapy, and
Mhm.
so it really is about more than just writing woes as a Black woman writer and things of that nature. So my initial question is always, how are you healing?
How am I healing? And I do use my writing as a healing method. And hopefully you can't see too much of my office right now because it's kind of a mess. But I have been writing since the fourth grade, because in the fourth grade I had a teacher who started me to journal. She taught us to have,
Hmm.
we had the black and white composition notebooks. That's how
Yeah.
we started. And so, and I started writing in that notebook. And a lot of people think of it as it's like a diary. And for me, what I journal is so much different from a
Hmm.
diary, because I'm not telling secrets in my journals. I'm actually kind of talking to myself and talking through things. And so for me also, that's what my writing is for me. I, I kind of work out issues
Hmm.
through my writing. If I hear something on the news and I don't like the way it sounded, or something happened to somebody or a friend or somebody I know, or a cousin's cousin or whatever, I can kind of work through those emotions that I'm feeling through my writing. So because I would honestly say that in each one of my books, there is a little piece of me in each one of those characters, and not in just the protagonist, but each one of those characters is
Exactly.
expressing some emotion, some feeling that I had, that I had to deal with, or that I dealt with, or that
Mhm.
caused me angst or anxiety. It's all in that book. So it's like you just kind of get to pour it all out. I don't
Mhm.
have to carry it around with me. I can use my writing to kind of get stuff out of my head and out of my soul and onto a piece of paper. And then it's like I can better deal with it that way. So that's how it's healing for me. And if at a particular time, if I'm not necessarily writing a story or in the middle of writing a manuscript, then I turn to my journals and do the same thing.
Mhm.
So, and because I go back and look at some of the things that I write, and I can almost kind of remember what I was going through at that particular time. So
Yeah.
all writing that I do, whether it's a blog post for my website, or if it's in my journal, or if it's on a manuscript or whatever. All of it's a little piece of me where I get to kind of purge some of those emotions and kind of put them on paper. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because I think for most writers, that is such, I don't know most writers, but for the writers I talk to,
Mhm.
and for myself as well, yeah, I have no idea what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling or how how I'm going to um, like circumnavigate a situation until I start writing about it. And
Mm.
I remember I saw a post, I think it was on Instagram, and you had your bujos, and I was like, oh my gosh, I am a bujoer too, but
Oh,
you're
are
like
you?
a I am, and so I
Wow.
have, like, I keep all of my bujos, my old ones, and it's so fun to go back and see, but you're like a really talented artist.
Well, I like to write, and I also like to paint and draw. So in my bullet journals, I got it. It's another just expression of creativity for me.
Mhm,
Because if I'm not writing, I'm painting or drawing. And I find with my bullet journal is that I will open it up more often if it looks pretty.
mhm.
So, I love sitting down and making it look pretty and seeing what I can put in it to make it creative and different from the last month, so that I'm going to open it up, because I mean, my bullet journals is a wealth of information for me. I keep, I'm always buying something online. So I keep a list in my bullet journal of all my packages, so I'll know when they actually get here to my house.
Uh-huh,
I keep a list of all the movies, because my sister or my son or someone will say, "Did you watch this movie?" I keep a list in my bullet journal of all the movies, that I list of movies. So whenever I'm bored, I need something new to watch, I could pull open my journal and find
mhm.
a new story to watch or something. So I am that thing. My bullet journal is just a wealth of information for me. I keep trip reservations and flight numbers and airplane leaving times and arrival times and addresses. All of that's in my bullet journal. So I don't know what I would do without it.
So what got you into bullet journaling?
That's a good question. What got me into bullet journal? Because I am a paper person. I am a pen
Mhm.
and paper person. So I know a lot of people now keep their schedules on their phone. And I am just a paper person. And like I said, I can't show you my office, but I love, and if you saw last weekend I was in New York, so I went to can't even pronounce the name of the store, but there's a store in New York that's a paper supply store that I actually love. It starts with the K.
Blix.
Well, I went to Blick Art Supplies as well,
Yeah.
but all around my office, I've got pens galore. These are my favorite pens. My
Oh, those I have those, the Tombos.
the
I
Tombos,
have I
yes,
have them all.
yeah, and and I want to be able to write it and turn the page, and I love good paper in my journal. So I'm
Mhm,
always looking for a journal that's really got nice thick paper that I can use
mhm.
pens and inks and maybe even a little watercolor in. It's just another expression of my creativity, I think.
I love that. Now, let me admit, because I don't want anybody getting it twisted, I am no artist, right? So I don't draw or paint very well, but
Okay,
that never stops me from
there you go.
drawing or painting. So, yeah, I saw some of your watercolor. It's just like, wow, you're so talented, very beautiful. So,
Well, when I see
yeah,
you in Chicago, bring your bullet journal. I'll try to bring my bullet journal, and we'll sit there.
okay.
We'll take notes together.
Okay, that, my friend, is a date, because
Okay.
I don't go anywhere without my bullet journal. So, okay, I have all my little notes here because I took
Okay.
a lot of notes. So you think you're not going to be a whole hour and a half?
If I keep yakking, I will, right?
Exactly. So we're going into the first segment, which is intentional writing. And I don't know if many people know that the word intentions has a
Mm.
medical definition. You're
Oh no,
shaking
I
your
didn't. No, I did not
no,
know that. No,
it
no. But that
does.
is my word for the year is intention. So I'm interested to hear
Oh,
what the medical definition is.
the medical definition of the word intentions is the healing process of a wound.
Oh,
And I decided that I don't care what anybody else or how anyone else defines intention or intentional. That's going to be my definition, because that is the whole purpose of everything I do, is to heal myself first, and of course, to help heal others in
Uh,
any way, shape, or form that I can. And I
uh,
find that like a lot of the writing that I read, especially by Black women writers, is so cathartic. And I know it's cathartic for like the writer, but it's like, do we know how cathartic our writing is for our readers?
probably not. Probably not.
Most of us probably don't even think
Um,
about it, right? But
mhm.
I've come to find out that, because I'm a reader, I'm an avid reader. And so of course, as I'm reading, I can feel some healing taking place, and I can say, oh, wait, okay, I never even thought about that. I
Uh-huh.
had some of those moments in the book you told me to start with.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
I didn't think about it like that.
Is that packed and
So
ready to go? That's the one I asked you to
yeah,
start with. Okay.
yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so I like to call this segment intentional writing.
Okay.
And basically, I asked you in the intake form, I said, so what's the most cathartic book you've written to date? And you gave me such a cryptic answer. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Well, I've written several romance books, and
Mhm.
romance has a formula to romance. In order
Yes,
for you have to have a happily ever after or a happily for now ending. And one of the reasons why I think I like writing women's fiction so much more is because, like life, it doesn't always have a happy ending
exactly.
or a happily ever after ending or a happy for now ending. So,
Mhm.
and that's what I kind of like about women's fiction, because
Mhm.
it kind of mirrors the life that I live. I'll say it that way, the life that I live. And so when you asked me about the cathartic book, like I said, and Packed and Ready to Go and Going Backwards are
Mhm.
women's fiction books. And and some of that stuff that I've written, I've known that to happen to people that I know personally, or people that I know from a distance, that you
Right.
and everybody probably knows someone who's been cheated on in their life.
Mhm.
So but even more recently, I have written, and it's not sitting in a drawer. It's actually on my desk, and I'm working on it. Another book that is very loosely based on some of the stories that I've heard my mother talk about, because it's a historical women's fiction that
Oh,
starts in the 1930s. My mother was born in the 1930s, so she grew up in the South. So she grew up in the Jim Crow South during the Great Depression as a Black woman. So
where in the South?
and she started out in Carolina, West Virginia, and then her family moved
Okay.
to Roanoke, Virginia. So just
Okay.
wrap it's just, if you can say the Jim Crow South, the Great Depression, and a Black woman, you can almost imagine the kinds of things that she had to deal with during that period of time. So I've taken some pieces of the things that she has told me, and
Mhm.
I've written a manuscript. It's still it's a manuscript, and I've had it. Of course, it's been professionally edited, and it's all ready. But that is one that's kind of right now that's kind of closest to my heart, because it's got a
Mhm.
little bit of my mama in it, and a little bit of other Black women during that time frame, and the experiences they must have gone through during that period of time. So that is probably one of the most cathartics. And even doing NaNoWriMo in November, I decided to start on book 2 of that book. So I had a name for that one. So it started out as three women. I say very young women, and then it comes up to, like, probably right now I'm in the 1960s, which is a little bit better than the 30s, but probably not a whole lot better in some
Mhm.
respects. So I'm writing book 2, and that has been kind of cathartic, especially with the world that we're living in today, with a lot of
Oh
people trying
gosh,
to
yeah.
erase some African American history, and we don't want to talk about slavery and the things that we don't want to talk about. So you say you guys may not want to talk about it, but I need to write these things down, so
Mhm.
at least maybe some parts of them aren't forgotten or washed away. So those are the ones that have been very cathartic for me to write lately, but they're not published yet. And I know I'm sitting on it. And I keep asking myself, why are you sitting on these books? And it's
Because
made me.
I was going to ask you. Look, I'm sitting here like I was like, shall I have the audacity to ask Miss Jacki Kelly, why are you sitting on these books?
That's a good question. And and I don't look at my books as my babies, and I don't want to release them to the world. But like those were so near and dear to my heart that I've got to make sure that I get them out into the world at the right time, and when it's right
Mhm.
for me, and I ask myself that regularly in my journal. I talk about the things that I need to do in the future, and that's one of the
Yeah.
things. What are you going to do with these two manuscripts? You've written them, you've taken them through several rounds of edits, you've had people look at them, you've gotten great feedback. So what are you going to do with them, Jacqueline? And I think maybe 2024 it will be the time. So later this year, I will say late this year,
Okay.
maybe sometime October, November, I will start making some firm decisions about what I want to do with those two books. Yeah.
Okay. I tend to,
Mhm.
I'm going to be honest, and I've said this so many times. I was born in the 70s,
Okay.
and so I came of age in the 90s and 2000s, right? And it was like the heyday for like Black writers when, everybody had a book club and yada yada yada. And then I'm not quite sure what happened, but I couldn't find any more Black women's fiction writers.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, I gave up and I stopped, I was like, okay, I'll just read, academic things and all that stuff. Um, and now that I have rediscovered Black women's fiction writers, like I was like, well, where did you guys come from? Like where where have you been? And how is it that I didn't know you guys were out there? And of course, the older I get, the more research I do, the more I realize it's not like widely publicized that we have all this great Black women's fiction out there. I can't find you in the bookstores, and you're not taking up a lot of real estate and like, digital because they're not putting you out there that way. And that was one of the main reasons why I decided, this isn't right. We need to do more to get these voices out here because I learn way so much about myself, about being a Black woman, about being a Black mother, a wife, all those things that we are, a writer, by reading, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I don't think they disappeared. I think that like we've always been writing. We just haven't had the publicity that we needed to get our voices heard. And you probably heard this a lot. There used to be a belief, I'll call it a belief, that, Black people didn't read. So we don't
Mm,
need to kind of publish so many of those books because they don't read. And it's like, well, yeah, we do. Because I like you, I've been reading since elementary school. My mother read a lot. And I remember as a child, she used to, our outings for us, we used to go into bookstores and walk up and down the aisles. And even when I got tired, my mama was still walking up and down the aisles buying
mhm,
books. So we've always been readers. And, when we couldn't find Black books to read, we read white books. We read,
yep,
whatever books were out there. We just had to read whatever was out there. But now I think people realize that, Black women, Black men, we do like to read, and we want
mhm,
to read about ourselves as well as other people. We like to read everything, but
yeah,
we want to read stories about people who look like us too, sound like us, who live like us.
yes. And I
Mhm.
find that I'm reading so much more historical fiction. And
Mhm.
I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't think it was my thing.
Okay.
I didn't think it was something that I would get into, but I find that, especially within the Black women's fiction writing area, it's a lot of historical fiction
Yeah.
being produced. And actually, it was so weird. My current work in progress is historical fiction, and I never thought I would write anything like that because
Okay.
I'm just like, that's not my thing. That's not my thing, you know. But like that's exactly what my thing is, and so why do you think that is?
Well, because we're learning because I think we're learning a lot about ourselves.
Hmm.
When I think about, and I was with my mother this past weekend, and we were talking about the educational system, and I said to my mother this weekend, I was out of college when I heard about what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to that Black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I didn't hear about that in junior high, high school, and not even in college. I was out of college. So now that we're finding all of this, we're finding out more information about our real history and things that we have accomplished and achieved and done. So, and I think we want to put that in writing. We want to celebrate our achievements in our past. So I think that's why we're seeing more and more people are writing historical fiction. Now, you probably heard of Vanessa Riley. She's a Black woman. Okay. She has written quite a few books lately about, and that, of course, my mind just went blank, but she's written about, a royalty, African-American royalty people, a lady, and I think it was Haiti who helped save. So she's doing quite a bit of research to find all this stuff out. Piper Hughley, the same thing. She just wrote this story about Anne Lowe. I didn't know the story about Anne Lowe until Piper read her. It's called, well, I should have had my Kindle in here because all my books are on my Kindle. And the story, it'll come to me in a minute, but the story, Anne Lowe is the woman who designed Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, was a Black woman, so we are finding out all of this history, this rich history that we knew nothing about. So of course, we want to put that stuff in writing. We want to share it with the world. So I think that is one of the reasons why we're seeing so much more historical fiction now. Even Sadiqa Johnson just wrote The Houses of Eve. Yeah. And that took place in the, I think I'm going to say 50s or 60s, around that time. So it's like, some of this stuff was really happening to people, and we're finding it out, and we're writing these stories about, the times that were hidden from us, or kept from us that we didn't know about. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that's my impression. Now, somebody might tell you something very different. Maybe those people just like historical fiction, but it's a wealth of knowledge in those books when you start to take a look at it.
Yes, and I think that's the joy of it for me, because I'm such a research buff. I absolutely love research, and like I tell everybody, I have done enough research on abnormal psychology and dissociative identity disorder for my last series. I could probably use it to get a PhD if I could defend it via the information, really, because I believe if you're writing anything, it's necessary that you are making it as believable as possible, even while providing, this kind of. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm fine. I'm just having a blast. I'm going back 5 generations, like into Victorian era. I'm just having so much fun and so much fun. So
and we need that, because a lot of times if you just give somebody a textbook, and it could be kind of boring. But if you could put it in a fiction and make it interesting, so you got some imagination weaved in there along with some, real historical facts, it makes it more interesting to read, So so that's a good way to get that information out there in the world. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. So very good. Let's see where we're going. Thank you for telling us a little bit about your unpublished work too. I didn't want to push you because you said, I'm letting it simmer. I love that.
I'm letting, and it's, and maybe I need a little push. It's like, you got to birth that baby, so get it on out there. So maybe, like I said, it's getting closer. It's getting close to being ready to hit. And my mother even asked me about it this last week when I was with her over the weekend. She said, because I asked her a lot of questions as I was writing it. I was really picking her brain, and she said, "What's going to happen with that book?" And I was like, It's coming, Mom. It's coming.
And it's really neat because I find that a lot of you're from up north. You said up in north.
I was born and raised in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so it's like I find so many people that I talk to. They're like, "Oh yeah, but my mom or my dad, they're from the South," because I am a South Carolinian, born and raised, and still thriving. And I find so many people are like, "Yeah, but I have Southern roots."
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's like
great migration when we all kind of, yeah.
Yeah, but even with the migration, I find it so interesting. You may have been born like in DC, but like to me, you feel like a Southerner.
Yeah, I do. Because my mother was born in, like I said, West Virginia. My father was born in Tennessee. So even though we lived up north, we still had those Southern roots, almost definitely.
Yes.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's what I think. You never really get rid of that stuff. Do you find that it's kind of woven into your writing, any of the Southernisms?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Almost definitely. Because my mother had a saying for every occasion. She had more saying. And some of them people have heard, and some of them they haven't heard, but they were old country sayings and whatever. And even to this day, I will use some of it. And my husband swears up and down. Every now and then I'll say something to him, and he's like, "Ooh, you went way back with that accent." And that southern drawl came into play. So he'll tell me that quite often. So
Okay, now we're going to pivot
okay.
because we're going to get into packed and ready to go.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna have to turn on my memory to remember everything about that book. Okay.
Okay, I should probably
Okay.
tell you, I am a former English teacher.
Uh-oh. Okay.
So I do a lot of close reading. I'm going to be honest with you, Miss Jackie. I tried because I told you I came across your book going backward,
Okay.
and I read that first.
Okay.
And then you said you might want to start with, and I was like, oh, okay. So I read it backwards,
Okay.
but I tried so hard to find a redeeming quality in Walter.
Could not do it, huh?
I couldn't. I was like, if Walter was on fire, I wouldn't spit on him. I wouldn't even spit on him. And I tried. I tried. I tried to look at it and to see his childhood and how he grew up in that way, and this mother who was probably blaming him for being like his dad. And I read all into it. I did the psychological. I still couldn't find a redeeming quality
Okay.
in Walter.
But I guess I'm the belief that I'm gonna rephrase this. I was going to say no one's born bad, but I would say now that very few people are just born bad. We learn to be bad or
Mhm.
mean, or cruel or whatever. And it's often things that happen to us that shape us, I think, as children or young adults.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what happened to Walter. Um, he wasn't, I mean, I didn't like him either, because no one would want to be married to anybody like that, of course. And I think you may have seen in book 2, he got his comeuppance or whatever, his
Uh-huh.
desserts. But his mother, for a man who was not loved the way he needed to be loved as a child and growing up, and he just never saw it. So he was never loved. He didn't know how to love. So you're not the only one who told me that he was not redeemable, and maybe that's the way I didn't mean to write him that way out, but surely though we don't want to look at him as he wasn't a hero by any stretch, not in the first book, not even in the second book. He wasn't a
And
hero,
not
but
even an anti-hero. Like he wasn't even an
yeah,
anti-hero.
yeah, he
I
he had some personality flaws for sure.
Oh, that's so funny that you should say that. I had a podcast for this, and it was called Enchanted Beast Podcast. And that was my bujo. That was my initial bujo. I did the podcast for no other reason. I didn't care if anyone listened to it. I did it because I was working through a lot of stuff. And I was like, I have 3 daughters, and
Okay.
I was diagnosed with lupus like back in 2013, and things were really kind of touch and go for a while. And I was like, well, I need to get all the stuff out here so that if I'm not here, then
Mm,
they can like have some of my mama's wisdom. And
mm,
so I did all these episodes, and I was going back because I thought, "Oh, I need to get a few snippets of some things for some other thing." And I listened to an older podcast that says, "Don't be a pain in the butt." And I was like, "They're not character flaws, they're character thorns, and they are there to warn and protect." And it was basically the exact same thing that you said, that everything that was going on with Walter was a learned behavior and a way to deal with his own trauma.
Mhm.
And again, intellectually, I'm there. I'm
Okay.
there.
Okay.
And but you wrote Walter in such a way, and this is like compliment here because I don't know if I could write a character that kept going like da 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 da, from bad to worse and recognizing it, knowing it, like seeing it, watching it happen, and still continuing to do it.
But and that's why I like women's fiction, because I know people like Walter. I
Mhm.
mean, because if I think about some failed relationships out there, and they seem to go from bad to worse. So,
Yes.
I mean, maybe not in the same way that Walter did, but so the some people, they lie and they cheat and they steal and they just keep doing bad things over and over again to the people that they are
Mhm.
supposed to love. So, to me, we don't like Walter, but Walter is a real character out there.
Like, so real. Like, he's so real, and that
27%. Any guesses what that number means? Is it the number of people in the US that listen to podcasts? Actually, that number is 24%. Well, in 2017, that number has increased exponentially up to 64% in March of 2023. Podcasting continues to be on the rise. It is the place to be. Only 27% of podcasts are hosted by women. Only 27%. Are you as shocked as I was? Just think of all the voices we are missing. Is your voice one of those? Is there a topic you keep thinking about? A message you know needs to be shared? Guests you want to interview? Or maybe you're an entrepreneur and you know that you want to help others get to know you better and know what you do. Podcasting is the way to do it. This is why I founded Authentic Connections Network. A podcast network that's so much more than you'd imagine. We take the tech and stress out of podcasting. We give you the power of a network, the power of community, of education around podcasting, of coaching, individualized supports, and all the other incredible women breaking through and changing the landscape of podcasting. Isn't it time you realize your dream? We believe strongly in our creators. We believe in Shawn and in Black Writers Therapy. There are conversations that need to happen, stories that need to be told. Authentic Connection Network is the place for them. Follow us on Instagram at 37by27. Comment the word amplify on any of our posts or DM it if that feels better to you. I want to learn more about you and your goals and how maybe you could be part of
fantasy
Authentic
turned Walter
Connections.
into a great guy, but you didn't, and I suffered with Tracy, suffered right with her. But then there's Tracy. Like, I have my whole list of discussion points
Uh-oh. Okay.
about the book overall. But I was like, I wanted to root for Tracy because hello, girl power. But then I was like, girl, what? Why? Why are you continuously doing this? Why are you know what he's doing? Your friends know what he's doing. Everybody knows what he's doing. Why are you putting up with this? You don't need him financially. You're good to go. You got this hot Italian who's trying to get with you. Hello, Marco. Your kid is grown. Why are you still doing this? Even if your kid wasn't grown. And then I started reading the subplot with Tracy and her parents.
See, it's all intertwined. But when I think about it, and I'm sure that anybody listening to this, and maybe even you, know a girlfriend or a friend or a sister or a cousin or a coworker, someone in your life or someone you've crossed paths with who is in a bad relationship and not getting out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy for us to say, because I'm one of those people like, I wouldn't take that. I'd be, that's who I am. So, and I guess a lot of times I'm expecting other people to be like me, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I sit back and I look at people in relationship and that are in unhealthy relationships, and they don't do that. And so, that's why I write books sometimes. I wonder why. Why can't you see what I'm seeing? I mean, if anybody listens to the news or watch 2020 or Dateline, and you hear about these women who are with men who end up killing them or whatever, and that's real life. And that's why I like women's fiction, because it is like real life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that happy stuff, because there are some women who are in bad relationships and they don't get out of them. They don't get out of like when I think I would get out. And you say boo to me the wrong way, and I'm out. But there are some people just kind of hanging there and in love, and you got to stay with someone, or what would my parents think of me if I don't do this? And he didn't mean it that way. And they just stay in bad relationships. And that got me to wonder, why do people stay in bad relationships? And I'm sure I could probably write 999 books about why men and women stay in
Mm-hmm.
bad relationships, because everybody's got a different reason why they do.
Yeah.
And, so
I'm going to tell you why I thought this book. I'm going to tell you why I was so mad with Tracy. Okay, so here's me being vulnerable because I refuse to be a hypocrite. I'm going to tell you why I was so mad with Tracy. Because I saw myself in her.
Okay.
And I was like, in so many ways, I was like, oh my gosh. My husband and I have been together since we were 17 in high school. And he's the only husband, the only guy. He's it. Like, that's it. Just like Tracy and Walter. And so we're 30 years in. Like, right, you know what I'm saying? We're 30 years in. And there were times when I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't working for me, blah, 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 blah. But I would never and I'm glad I didn't, because okay, that's my dude. I love him. But, I was like, why didn't I just leave when I wanted to? Like before we got married, before we were all into kids and this is that and the third. And I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that's why. Because my family told me that I was going to be an XYZ and I'd have this many baby daddies and all the other things. And so I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I was like, oh, Tracy, your daddy, you got pregnant before you got married. I didn't do that because, I was like, my family thought I would, and they thought I wouldn't, So it was like, she's sticking it out to prove to her daddy that they would have been together anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And there were times that I was just like, I don't know if I even want to be married. I don't even know if I believe in marriage. And so, but I was like, no, because I am not going to be what my family said I was going to be.
See, there are always reasons why people, and I don't always see that, because sometimes, it's like I have my blinders on and it's like, I would do this, and this. But, that's old saying that you never know what someone is going through until you walk a mile in their shoes,
Exactly.
So, yes, because every situation is a little bit different why people do the things they do. And in women's fiction, it's almost like I get to tell the real truth about, what people do and what people don't do. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I realized that I was taking my notes and I was like, why are you so troubled with Tracy? Oh, that's why. That's why, because she
Yeah.
reminds you of you,
Oh,
Dingleberry. Okay. But yeah, so I mean, I think the skill with which you didn't say a lot about it. It wasn't something that was so explicit that it was just obvious. Okay, that they came from these really kind of jacked up situations and it really did a number on them. You were so soft and subtle with it. Like, Tracy loves her mom and dad and she's always there taking care of them and da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, you were a little less subtle with Walter because Walter obviously has issues with his mom, but still, it wasn't something that you beat over the head. You didn't
Well,
beat the
because,
reader over the head with it.
because in real life, sometimes the things that shape us, we are not even aware that it's shaping us. You know, I,
Exactly.
you know, I often tell the story. When I was getting ready to go off to college, my mother said to me, she said, "Well, what are you going to study in college?" And I told her I wanted to study journalism.
Hmm.
Okay. My mother said to me, "When you go to college, you better study something so when you graduate, you can get a job." Because my mother grew up in the 1930s in the Jim Crow South during
Yes.
the Depression. Women didn't write. Black women didn't write anyway, So I went to school and I got a degree in business administration,
Hmm.
got an MBA as well, because women didn't write. Black women did not get paid to write, according to my mother. So now, and I was with my mother this weekend, and she said to me, "Do you ever think about going back to school?" I was like, "No, I don't want any more degrees. Now, if I go to school, if I take any learning, I don't want it to be where I need a grade. I'm going to take a painting class, a writing class, a drawing class. I'm going to do all the fun stuff that I didn't get to do back then.
Right.
I want to write, I want to draw, I want to paint. I want my creative side to come out. When I retired
Hmm.
from my job, I was a financial manager. And now in my sorority, a lot of times they're looking for people to help manage the finances. It's like, I am not the one. I don't want anything to do with numbers anymore or spreadsheets anymore. I'm leaving all that behind because, see, that's the baggage that my mother settled on.
Hmm.
That and no disrespect to my mom, she was talking to her daughter based on her experiences and what
Exactly.
life showed to her. And see, that's what happens to a lot of us. Even our parents say little things to us, and we
Yep.
internalize it so very differently that you end up 30 years later doing something that somebody said to you way back when, and you're like, why am I still doing that? And it's because those things, they kind of germinate in your soul, and they grow, and they take
Hmm.
life of their own, that kind of thing. So yeah, yeah. And you don't and parents, they don't mean any harm most of the time when they tell you that. They're just telling you, they're trying to tell you what they think is best for you at that particular
Yes.
point in time. But the world keeps changing and evolving. So, I wish now, I wish I had gone to school and studied journalism. I think I would be light years further along than I am right now. But I took my mother's advice, and here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom told me don't major in English. And I was like, there's absolutely nothing else I want to major in. She was like, you're not going to get a job. I said, I don't want a job. I just want a life. That's all. I just want a life.
Smart woman. That's what I should have told my mama.
But, no. You look, and my mom was very disappointed, but now she's not. So,
Oh, okay. Okay.
whatever. So I have my little list here of all the things that I found in the book that you touched on, and we've touched on a lot of them. The marital infidelity, loveless marriages, um, toxic masculinity, and I put slash emasculation because I think that toxic masculine energy is a result of
Of
emasculation.
exactly.
Yeah. And I love that you touched on the mother-son relationship. Everybody always says that sons love their mothers and the daughters love their dads and all that other stuff. But I don't know. I don't think that people really explore how mothers can really destroy their sons and make them a big problem for the women that they.
Yeah, and a lot of different ways, not just in that way was extremes, but mothers who don't want their sons to learn how to cook or to sew or to sweep a floor, because that's not, it's like, yeah, the things that we do for our sons versus our daughters. But
Mhm.
hopefully things are changing now. So
Yeah, I absolutely love how you did that. Now, maybe this is just me because, I'm in this space, but like I was reading Tracy, it's like she's a wife, she knows how to be that. She is a mother, she knows how to be that. She's an employee, she's good at that. A daughter, yep. A friend, of course. What she doesn't seem to be comfortable being is a woman.
Mm, yeah. She can take care of everybody else but herself. She is good
Yeah.
at and a lot of women, me included, often do that. We spend a lot of time taking care of everybody else, and we put ourselves last on the list. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I need to cook the dinner. I need to, get the kids ready for school and do the homework. I need to do this at work, and I need to go see so and so who's in the hospital, and I need to take them flowers. But where's the time for yourself? Where do you sit back and say, what does Jackie need? What do I want to do? Do I just want to soak in the tub for 30 minutes with a bubble bath with a good book? And that's usually the last thing on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something else that I have in my bujo that I didn't mention is I have a page of self-care, and I list down
Yeah.
all the things for me that I consider self-care. Self-care is going to be different for everybody, but I put a list down. So whenever it's like, okay, I need to put myself on the list, I go take a look at that and say, well, what kinds of things do you like to do that you could fit into your time right now? Is it a bubble bath? Is it going to get your nails done, or getting a pedicure, or just painting,
Mm-hmm.
or just doing a massaging your head, whatever the things, because we put ourselves last all the time, and
Yeah.
that's what Tracy did. She was so busy being everything for everybody else, she was never there for herself. She was
I
never there.
think the thing that you touched on that I really wanted to talk to you about with Tracy was she did not own her sexuality.
Mm, okay.
She didn't
Okay.
own it because like she wasn't like when I read through it, because I write like through an erotic lens, I write erotica, I do it all. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, this beautiful man, because I'm seeing him as something like extra yummy, right? So I'm like, this beautiful man is all up in your business and you're having all these great fantasies, but you don't even know how to move and be okay with any of like that energy, like to just own it, not for him, but just for herself. But then I was happy in book two because, yay, Tracy. But I'm like, but she didn't, she was so out of touch with it. If Walter didn't want her in that way, then it was like, okay, that's not a part of me anymore.
Because, well, because they both came at marriage very differently. Because Walter, of course, he had an affair. Tracy would not have had an affair as long
Mm-hmm.
as she was committed to it. That was not something that she would have done, that she thought her parents would approve of, or any of that stuff. So there was no way that she was going to even think of herself as a sexual being other than with Walter. That was the only person that she could be. And even sometimes I think, if I wrote it, that she even thought her fantasies of with Marco were almost taboo. I shouldn't be thinking like this.
Yeah, she was so guilty. She felt guilty for even the fantasies. Like,
Even the fantasy. Well, there are some people say, what is it about, if even if you lust with your mind, that's a form of
mm,
cheating. So she was from that
yeah,
school of thought. Just to
I was
think
just,
about it is taboo.
there's so many women out there like that though, especially like in that age where the kids have gone away and like, you're looking at this person that you married and you're like, I don't even know who he is anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't even know who I am anymore. You've just done such a beautiful job, like with with the people. You didn't overwrite. Like, you know what I'm saying? You don't overwrite.
Thank you.
And that
Thank
is a gift.
you. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Because I'm like, I can read it and you leave enough space so that I can have my own interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how
I,
so
I
how
don't
do you
want to
do
hit
that?
you over the head. How did I do that?
Yes, because I am just like, I'm all for, how they say show don't tell. You're like
Mhm.
the master of show don't tell.
Well, thank you. That is a compliment. I appreciate that. Um,
You're welcome.
I I remember once someone said that Toni Morrison said that every word in her book has a meaning. And if you took any one of those words out, it would change the whole gist of her
Mm,
story. So she does not write filler. And I love Toni Morrison. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I'm as good as Toni, but I wish I were. But when I write, I try to keep that in mind. And I've taken some courses where they talk about don't get writerly, because you can hit people over the head with some stuff. But I do
Mm-hmm.
want people to kind of interpret the story, and everybody's going to interpret it a little bit differently, and I'm okay with that. And that's what kind of like what
Mm-hmm.
I want everybody to kind of interpret it. Just put your own nuances on the story, or you'll bring your own history or baggage to that story and interpret it the way that resonates with you. So I can't tell you how I do it. I just try to think, just if it's a word, it needs to have a meaning, or it doesn't need to be in the book.
I
Really.
like that because yeah, it was a pleasure to read it. And it's like, I don't know. I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed that. And Toni Morrison's one of my favorite writers too.
Okay.
And you looked at sisterhood. I love, love, love Ursula. I'm gonna make you laugh. So this weekend I went to a tea party. One of my friends is a member of the Lions Club, and so they had a fundraiser, and we went to the tea party. And one of our other friends brought a person from work, and she introduced her. She's like, "Oh, guys, this is Ursula." I was like, "Shut up!" I said, "I am reading this book." And the protagonist's best friend, her name is Ursula, and I was like, I don't know any Black Ursulas. I want a friend named Ursula. And here she was, and we clicked like
Oh.
that. It was so funny. And so she was like, "So now you have a friend named Ursula." I was like, "Yes, because I wanted one. You made Ursula so cool, and this girl reminds me so much of your Ursula." I think that might be kind of a, if you're an Ursula, this is your personality. Because I
And
promise you, she was so much like her.
was she? And I am big on female relationships. I think I honestly believe if a woman has some good friends in her life, she's got it made. And I don't
Mhm,
mean acquaintances, I mean good friends. And
mhm,
I think I am lucky enough that I do have some good friends in my life, some people who I can cry on their shoulder, who cry on my shoulder, who kind of lift me up when I'm down and keep encouraging me, say, keep on, you can do this, you can do. So I've got some good friends in my life, and I think
mhm,
every woman should try to find some good friends to kind of hold you up, to be there for you, because and you need to be there for them. You got to show up for them as well.
mhm.
But I mean, those are relationships, and some of the friends, I mean, we've been friends for 40, 50 years. We've been friends lots of years, long
Wow.
time. So we've got lots of history together. So yeah.
I hate to stop right here, but we got to pay the bills. We'll be back after this message.
So almost in every book that I write, someone gonna have a friend in there. They might be one, they
Mhm.
may be two, but they gonna have a friend in there, because I do believe that strongly in female relationships, friendships. Yeah.
Yeah, I am actually at a place where I'm just starting to cultivate those friendships.
Okay.
And I guess I had a whole heap of work to do. I have one friend, but she's my cousin, right? And
That
we
counts.
are, of course, and we've been like, from the womb to the tomb. That's our motto. She's 4 months older than me. So she
Okay.
is my bestest friend. But I am now cultivating these friendships with women outside of my family. And I think it was because like I didn't trust myself enough, and I wasn't quite sure if I would be like, interesting enough and to sustain these things. So after the work is done, yes, it's a good thing to have these women like in my life, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, because sometimes, I have conversations in my head all the time, and sometimes I have to bounce them off somebody. And my poor husband, he probably said, I need a break, because he don't want me yakking at him all the time. So, me and my girlfriend, we might go to lunch, and we just sit there, and I get to purge all this stuff, and then she can,
Mhm,
she tell me, yeah, you crazy, or no, that makes perfectly good sense to me. So sometimes
yes.
because you need to get another point of view, sometimes.
Mhm.
So yeah, I believe in female friendships. I really do.
I love theirs. I absolutely love it. Okay. So where are we? Yes. You said something earlier that just you can always kind of remember what was going on in your life. when you were writing a certain thing.
Mhm.
So what was happening when you wrote Packed and Ready to Go?
Well, I have had several friends who have gone through divorce, and they have gone through divorce for various reasons. And some of those relationships I still have, and some of them are not as close, because it's almost like when if you have a friend that's a couple, a male and a female that are a couple, it's like when they get divorced, somebody gets that friend, either the wife
Yeah.
gets the friend or the husband gets the friend or something. I'm not sure why that is, but that kind of happens. So, and when I wrote that one, I was probably looking back at some of my friends who had gone through divorce. And that story was probably a culmination of some of the reasons why they went through
Mm-hmm.
divorce. And but like I said, and more than anything, I wanted to explore, as a married couple, your marriage has to go through evolutions. My husband and I have been married over 40 years. So, you go through evolution when you first get married and it's young and you're free, you don't have any kids,
Mm-hmm.
and you have lots and lots of fun. And then the kids come along and then you spend lots of years raising the kids and
Yes.
your husband, you have it's almost we talking tag team. Do this, I got this, because you're so
Mm-hmm.
busy raising the kids. And my husband and I tried to, as we was raising kids, it was always very important for me to make sure I continue to have a relationship with my husband. So when my kids get grown and leave, I won't look at him and say, "Who are you?"
Exactly.
I wanted to still know who he was. So and so I wanted to kind of capture what can go wrong
Mm-hmm.
if you don't stay connected some kind of way through that marriage. Because now my husband and I are empty nesters, and now and I was golfing. I haven't golfed in a while, but he is still golfing, and I keep saying we still need to make sure we do things to connect. Because now I'm writing and I'm drawing, and he's not a creative person at all. But we still try to find ways to keep us connected, because marriage it's work. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it's not something that you just kind of breeze through.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very conscious of your relationship forever. As
Mm-hmm.
long as you're in a relationship, you have to work on it and nurture it and make sure it's important to you. So I was trying to kind of show that, and this is a couple who just grew apart. And like I said, they didn't know each other. She didn't know him. He maybe didn't care to know her. And this
Mm-hmm.
is what can go wrong if you don't, if you don't take care of your relationship. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was probably pulling. No story that I tell is about any one person. I know
Right.
most writers try to stay away from that unless you're writing about a specific character in history, because you try to stay away from that because I don't want somebody to sue me and say that's my life story. So I said take a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a
Yes.
little bit of this, and I put it all together. So at that point in time, I probably had some friends that were going through some difficult times, and I was just trying to capture maybe some of their reasons or some of that
Mm-hmm.
reasoning, some of my own, reason about what I thought from the outside looking in, what was
Yeah.
going
Okay. We are going to pivot,
on. Okay. P-
um, because we're going to go ahead and hit segment 2, the audacity of Black women writers.
Oh.
But before we get into that, I asked you, what about working in the publishing industry um, would send you to a therapist's couch if this was like, if I was a legit therapist offering services to Black women writers? What about the industry? I am not a licensed therapist. Uh, but what about that would send you? And you said,
Oh,
I
what did I
don't
say?
know if there is a large enough market for your writing. You
Mhm.
chose that one. That would be the thing that would send you screaming to the couch. Help me, help me, doctor. So why that one?
Well, because I think I need to make sure I coach because it's the right way. There's a lot of talk in the industry because there at one point in time there were some people that think that everybody is looking for um, uh, own voice stories is what they said, own voice stories. And so some people thought they were being left out of the publishing field altogether because they didn't have own voice stories. And it's like, I mean, I'm not seeing that. I guess I would almost say if you almost talk to any person of color who's writing a story about the person of color, they would almost tell you the same thing. I had an experience not too long ago where I submitted my historical fiction to an agent, and she came back to me and she said to me, I just had a baby and I'm in a very happy place right now. So I don't want to, take a look at any sad stories. I thought, now, maybe that's just what she said because she didn't like the story. And maybe that was the nicest thing she could have said to me to let me down, that she didn't like the story. But maybe I think I would have just rather her say, I didn't like this story. But don't tell me you don't want sad stories, because, if people are writing their experiences, and unless you're just taking a look at romance or whatever, children's books, just because that's not what you're interested in doesn't say that that's not what anyone is interested in. So to put it in such a narrow field, our writing, our books, is such a narrow category. To me, it just does a disservice to all Black people, because just, there are all kinds of people of color in the world. We're all very different. We've all got different stories. We've all got different backgrounds. We've got different baggage. And so don't narrow us down and think you can only tell this kind of story. So that definitely sends me to a couch, because people say, well, that story is so sad, or I wanted to have a happy ending. And I'm not saying, like I said, in my story, I wrote book 2, but sometimes some stories don't have a happy ending. I mean, you think about like Zora Neale Thurston, who she passed away in Florida's in some unmarked grave,
and nobody knows anything about her.
Exactly. And you take a look at, some of the people, it was a Diana Washington who was a Black singer back in the 40s and 50s. And I mean, she was hooked on heroin, but she went to the hospital. She was a famous person. When she went to the hospital, no one knew who she was. She laid on a gurney in the hospital wing and died. So we don't always have happy endings. Exactly. But does that mean our story doesn't get told because it doesn't have a happy ending? Should I just smack a happy ending on it to make you feel better? That drives me to a couch. I ought to be able to tell our stories the way our stories happen, the way I see it, the way I want it to play out in my fictional world, not one to suit you.
Right. Right.
And are you saying to me that no one wants to read that kind of story? I find that very hard to believe, because I read those kind of stories. I read stories that don't always have. Like I said earlier, I read Sadiqa Johnson's book, The Houses of Eve. I didn't think that had a necessarily happy ending. I mean, have you read that story?
I've not read it yet. It's on my TBR.
Okay, I won't tell you the ending, but I mean, the way it ended, it was okay, but it wasn't like everybody was singing and dancing in the street at the end,
Right.
because our stories, especially if they're historical, that took place in
they're
the
not going to be singing and dancing in the street.
Exactly. So I said to myself, well, I said to myself two things. First, that wasn't the agent for me. If that's her feeling, then that's just, and maybe she just didn't like my story. She was just trying to tell me, in a nice way, I don't like this story. But, sometimes you need to be honest, because if you make up a lie, to me, it's almost worse. So what she told me was even worse than saying, this is not the story for me. That story she told me was worse than saying, this is not the story for me. So that's what drives me to a couch. Tell me that we're going to write historical fiction and it's got to be a happy ever after ending. Because I've read, life is just not like that, especially in some of the historical fiction books that, if you're writing historical fiction and you're writing about people of color or Black people, more than likely it's not gonna,
Exactly. And if you're writing historical fiction and you're writing accurate historical fiction, especially in this country, it doesn't matter who you're writing about, it is not going to be happy, because in order for those who are like dancing in the street at the end of the story to be dancing in the street, somebody is not dancing in the street. And if you can't tell their side of the story, then what are you doing?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what drives me to the therapist couch. It's like, let us tell our stories the way we want to tell our stories. Don't tell us how we need to tell that story, and say it needs to have a happy ever after ending, because that's, because the way I ended that first book, it was a satisfactory ending. It wasn't dancing in the street, but because the premise of the book is, a black women during that time, we had narrow choices. We had few choices.
Mhm.
So what you had to do was you had to take a look at the few choices that were available to you and pick the best one.
Right.
So, and that's what and I think that's how I picked it. The women at the end of the story, they picked the choices that were best for them. It wasn't like, I'm going to marry some rich guy and go live up in, Hollywood or whatever. That was not one of their choices. One of
Right.
their choices was, maybe I can marry this man, and he's going to take care of me and my baby and keep us safe and keep a roof over our head. Maybe that's reality back in the 1940s and 50s. It's like, I may not love him to death, but he is a good man, a good provider, and he's going to take care of me. That's the choice I
That's
got.
reality right now. That's that's a reality for some people right now.
Exactly.
Right now.
Yeah. So, because she wasn't dancing in the street, but that's reality. That's what so I know. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
that would put me on the couch. Yeah.
That is one of my, the story that I'm writing now. It's again, and I'm like, this is the one that I'm going to query with. And I am just like, I oh, I don't even know what to say, because I'm like, who am I going to query? And I'm
Yeah.
looking, and I'm compiling my list, and I'm just like, I already know. It's like, get prepared, because you're gonna get those types of responses, right? That are kind of arbitrary and without merit. And then you're gonna get maybe some thoughtful ones, and hopefully you'll get like, yes, send me some more. But
Yeah.
it's like, I always, like, I don't want to be the writer who says, are you saying this because
Yeah. But and you never really know. You never really know.
yeah.
So I wish there were more Black women fiction agents out there, with Black women, I would say Black agents who were looking for women's fiction. They could be male or
Mhm.
female, so because maybe they get it and they could see a value in a story, and they can understand how a story could be marketed and sold, because they kind of understand the history. Because if you don't, and we're talking about now erasing some of the history and not talking about some of this stuff, and it's going to make it even harder, because you're going to start talking about stuff that no one has a clue about because they didn't learn about it in school. They'd be like, hey, this is not
Exactly.
true. This never happened. What are you talking about? So it's going to make
Yeah.
things harder versus easier. So yeah, yeah. So if you've got a couch, let me know, because I need to rest my head on that sofa
This is
pillow.
the only couch I have, Miss Jackie. This is all I can offer. This
Well,
is it.
thank you for letting me get some of that off my chest. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I do what I can. I do what I can for the people. Um, so blah 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 blah. You've Honestly, you've already answered this whole audacity. So even with all of that, you're going to query, and you're going to have these books published. What gives you the audacity to say, I don't care about XYZ, because I'm going to do this and da 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 da? Like,
Because I think anybody who has the audacity to sit down and spend the time at a computer, at a keyboard, with paper and pen, and write a story, whether it's 60, 70, 80,000, 100,000 words, to put all that story. So you should have the audacity to publish it, whether you submit it to agents and a publishing company, or whether you self-publish it. Because you have the audacity to show up every day, to put paper to pen or fingers on a keyboard, then you have the audacity to get your words out there. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's going to buy your book, but you sure enough, we gotta even if you just sell your book to your mother and your cousin and yourself, that's okay. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we may have to change our definition of what success looks like or whatever, because you get your story out there, and it may not be popular today, it may be popular 2 years from now, 5 years from now. But if you have the audacity to write it, go ahead and publish your story. That's
I
my
love
philosophy.
that. I love that. Okay. Oh, this is my favorite part.
Uh-oh.
We get to play the game.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Tell the whole story.
Okay.
My favorite part. So, basically, I'm going to give you a word, and you're going to share a little 1 to 2 line anecdotal story that will fall under either hashtag bookish or hashtag writer's life or hashtag writing while Black.
Okay. I hope I can remember that. Bookish,
Okay.
writing while Black, and writer's life. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
And I just took the word story, and I have some words that start with those letters. So the first word is smart.
Smart. I would say that's writer's life. And yeah, I can tell you a little bit because I'm not saying that you have to be smart to be a writer, but you've got to think you know what you're writing about. So even if you don't, you've got to think you know what you're writing about. So that's why I would say writer's life. If you sit down, you got to have the confidence that this is a story, and only I can tell this story this way. So and you got to be kind of smart to kind of think that in your head, I think.
Yes, I agree. Or at least look smart enough to make your readers believe that you know everything that you're talking about.
True.
The next word is tension.
Tension. Okay, I got to remember the categories again. So it's bookish, writer's life, or what was the other one? Writer's life
Writing while Black.
and tension. 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 Again, I'm going to say that's writer again, the writer's life, because every book, the way I write, my fundamental belief for writing is every scene has to have tension in it. Something's going to be going wrong. And I don't mean physically wrong, whether it's the way I'm thinking or what I'm seeing, is you've got to have to hold a reader's interest. You've got to have tension on almost every scene. Some people have said you've got to have tension on every page to keep the writer hooked. You've got to have something going on, going wrong, that's not in order. So, I try to think about that. So every scene, I remember taking a course once, and Sherry Adair said, with every scene you write, you have to say, what is the purpose of this scene? And I try to do that. So in every scene, something is happening, something is going wrong, or we're building up to something going wrong. So there's got to be a lot of tension almost in every scene.
Okay, that's interesting. Now my crazy brain is like, well, why is that? Are human beings not capable of just enjoying peace?
And there's no story. If there's no tension, there's no story. If Jack and Jane went up the hill to fetch a pail of water, if Jack didn't fall down, you wouldn't have no nursery rhyme. They went up the hill, they got the water. In the story.
Okay. Look, okay. I still want human beings to just like something pretty, but no, that's not happening. Okay. Where are we? Opening.
Man, you come with these words are hard to connect. Opening. I'm going to say that would be hashtag reader opening. Because one thing about me, when I am reading a book, if I am not hooked in that opening scene, I will close a book up and move on in a heartbeat.
Are you a DNFer?
What does that mean? What's a DNF?
Did not finish reading.
Because I used to, when I started a book, I used to finish a book. That was my philosophy. But then I said, why? Why do you do that? We're talking about self-care. If this book is not giving me what I need, and I'm not saying that book is bad, it's just not giving me what I need to close it up and move on. So now the first few pages, I'm reading it, and if it doesn't draw me in or it doesn't hold my attention, I close that book up and I move on. So the opening, as far as me being a reader, it's got to happen in that opening. It's got to be like this to keep me, for me. And I'm not saying that it's got to be something action driven, but it's got to be something that resonates with me, something that I want to hear. I've got to like the person who's speaking, whether it's the protagonist or the antagonist, whoever's talking, those first, I need to like what they're saying or be interested in what they're saying, or else I'm not going to finish that book.
I love that. Time is too precious to give to stuff you don't have time to give to.
Intention.
I like that. Intention. Exactly. I love that. And you said hashtag, that would be bookish.
Bookish. Okay. Bookish.
Yeah.
Bookish.
Okay. And we only have 2 more to go. You're doing really good. Read.
I would say that's bookish. And what was the third one? Not bookish and
Writing While Black or Writer's Life?
I'm going to Writer's Life, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's where I would put it. Because what was the word again? The word was
read.
Read. Because, well, of course, as a reader, I am reading a lot, and I've got books everywhere, and I'm always reading something. I try to read for pleasure. I try to read for education. Something that's going to help teach me something, or show me something different, or show me how to do something different. So, and I just can't imagine people who don't read. I'm like, what do you do if you don't read?
I know.
I can't imagine not reading. I just, yeah.
No. I don't even remember a time when I couldn't read. Like, that was something that we had to do an assessment on when I was teaching. And it was like, when did you learn to read? I'm like, I don't remember not reading.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember not reading.
When I talk to people, they tell me they don't read. I'm like, you don't read? What do you do?
We can't talk. Look, you don't read, we can't talk. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, you might not read fiction, but do you read nonfiction? How can you? I just can't.
I know, an article, grocery list. Anyway. Okay, this next one, you're probably gonna give me the stink eye, but I've been wanting to use this one. So here we go. It's a Y. Yin and yang. Yin and yang.
Let's put that in all 3 categories.
Oh, I've not had that before.
Well, because like I said, from a reader's perspective, if I'm reading, I've got to be getting something out of it. So, I'm giving you my time, my dollars. I'm hoping you're giving me some entertainment because I love to read fiction. As a writer, I have to almost kind of do the same thing. I'm writing a story that I hope resonates with someone out there. So I'm giving you something and I hope that you are getting something from it. So I'm giving you some pleasure, some entertainment, because that's why I'm writing it. And when we talk about the writers of the Black writer's life, we get to what history has tried to bury. We have found a way to it up and to tell our stories. So, and to me, it kind of almost fits in every one of those categories because, it's like we're not going to be quiet. We're not going to go quietly into that good night. We're going to find a way.
I knew you were going to say it.
We're going to find a way to tell our stories. So,
yes.
So if the yin is like, shh, don't tell that, keep quiet about that. So we got pencil and paper. We gonna find a way.
We have TikTok. Somebody is going to find out about it.
We're gonna tell our stories. Our stories have been quiet way too long. So that to me, it fits almost in every category. And that's the way life is. There's always a give and a take or push and a pull in life.
That was fun. You did good. Most people dread the game. You did really good. I have one more question.
Okay.
Okay. One more question. And I think it was yes, because this is the one you said I could ask.
Uh-oh.
What's
Okay.
the most difficult scene you've ever written, and how did you find the strength to do it?
The most difficult scene that I've ever written.
Mhm.
Well, and this is not necessarily women's fiction, but I find it very difficult to write sex scenes.
I
And,
couldn't tell.
oh, a
Good.
romance, most, well, I shouldn't say most, romance, a lot of romance novels have a sex scene in them. And I
Mhm.
was on a readers cruise last September, and, and I've been kind of moving away from doing that because I'm finding them so difficult to write. And,
Mhm.
uh, and doing that readers cruise, several of the readers said they want sex in their books. I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, darn it.
Mhm.
Because um for me, and maybe I'm old fashioned, I don't know, but it's in the bedroom and the sex scene. To me, there's only so many words you can use to describe body parts or the act of sex or whatever. And it's like, so you're trying to come up with new and more imaginative ways to say the same thing for people who are
Mhm.
doing. I was like, and unfortunately or whatever, in my last couple of books, I think they have had very few sex scenes in them. I do find them very difficult to write. Maybe I'm a prude, I don't know, but I am trying to get better. I was saying to some writer friends the other day, we have our conference call once a week and we get together and talk. And I was saying, I need to start, because I like a lot of women's fiction, but I need to start reading more of some of the YA stuff and some of the younger stuff because I kind of know what those young people are talking about, what they're saying. So you kind of know what's going on in the world. We live in our own
Yeah.
little bubble and we kind of know, I know this stuff, but if you want to be able to write, you got to always keep educating yourself
Mhm.
on what's going on out there, what's the newest thing and what's going on. So, but those
Yeah.
are the most difficult things for me to write because I run out of words and, you know, what's another word to say for breast or whatever. So I'm trying, I'm trying.
Yeah,
So,
I think probably I know I'm in like a couple of critique groups here in Columbia, and I'd have a like they're like older women, older white women.
okay.
They make up the majority of the writing association. Older white women and older white men. I mean, you know, and
Yes.
they tend to write like very not sexy scenes in their pieces. And so for me, to give them they're like, oh, w- we can't, we
Uh-huh.
can't listen to that. It's just so I'm like, but you all have children. What are you doing? But
Yeah.
I can see why it could be kind of daunting to have to write one if
But
it's
you
not
have to take a
something.
look at your audience. It's like, who are you writing? And this is what I said to my writing group when we started talking about that. Who are you writing for? And when I look
Mhm,
at writing, I think I'm writing for 25 to 65 plus year olds. So if I'm writing for a span that wide and not just for 50 and up, then you got to think about what are the what are younger readers, if you want to hold their attention, what do they want to read and how do they say it and what are they doing, and you got to
yep,
stay on top of that.
and
If
they
you want,
want all the things.
they want all the things. You're exactly right. So, as we get older, it become harder and harder. So you got to read more so you'll understand
Mhm,
what they're saying and what they're doing. And my husband gets on me sometimes because I look at some wild stuff on television, but I'm saying this is part of what's
yes,
a lot of that reality television. That's what they're into. So I want to hear how they talk and what they're interested.
mhm,
It's all educational. So you have to kind of do that. Yeah.
yeah, true, true, true. Jackie, we're done.
Okay. Okay.
We are
You
done. I can't even believe it. Um, thank you like so much for
got
coming on the show. And I want to just invite you to be a part of what will be a group therapy session, which is kind of a roundtable that I'll pull some of the writers from the season back together and we can
okay.
like really talk about some interesting industry things and
Okay.
so forth and so on. So I would love to extend that invitation to
Please
you
do.
to come
Please
back
do.
And
Okay.
thank you. And of
Oh,
course, this would not be a therapy session if I didn't give you homework.
okay. And I got my pen. I'm ready. What you got?
This is really easy. Is there a Black woman writer that you would recommend to come and sit on my proverbial couch?
Oh, most of the ones that I would think about, you've probably already got them on your list already. I know you've got Piper Hughley.
I don't have Piper.
Oh, Piper. You got to get Piper Hughley on you. She's the one who wrote the book about Anne Lowe. That's
Yes.
by her own design is the name of her book. She's very good. I know you've got Denny Bryce on your list. I would say try to get because I keep saying her name over and over again because I just finished her book, Sadiqa Johnson, on your
I know.
list.
I thought about putting her on my list, and I was like, she is all over the place.
Oh, oh, she
Like,
well,
I'm
she
just
might be a
like,
little busy right now.
yeah,
But even some of the older, like Marguerite Golden, have you? I read a book by her not too long ago. It was about a woman whose husband ended up with Alzheimer's, and I don't ask me. I read so much I can't remember but it was a very good book. That I thought it was very interesting. It was again, that was another book that didn't necessarily have a happy ever ending, but it was a really good
right.
book. So I would say Marguerite Golden.
Okay.
Is that enough, or do you want a few more?
I'm always open for as many as you want to give me.
Okay. Well, maybe if I think of some other ones, I can shoot you an email. But Vanessa
Yes.
Riley, I said to you already about Vanessa Riley.
Yeah, I've reached out to her, so hopefully she'll kinda, she gave me a lot, Miss Jackie. Thank you so much.
You're more
I'm
than welcome.
so honored that you said yes, and that
Um,
hopefully I can see you in Chicago in September.
Lord willing, the creek
And
don't rise, I will be there. And I'll bring my bojo.
okay, well, I'll be bringing mine and my combos, and we can
Okay.
bujo together.
Okay.
And that's it. Thank you so much. I
All
really
right.
appreciate it. You have a great week.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, Ella. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this session of Black Writer Therapy. Be sure to follow and leave a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And keep the conversations going on Instagram using our hashtag Black Writer Therapy. I'm your host and unlicensed therapist, Ella Shawn, reminding you to be kindest to yourself first, always and in all ways. See you guys next week. Bye.